Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Mem Zayin of Masechta Shabbos, Daf 147. Cool Daf. What can I tell you? Okay, we're going to start off talking about drying clothes in private, also known as Maris Ayin. Doing things when we don't want people to see. Talk about shaking out clothing. Can you give your clothes a little shake on Shabbos? Going out with different types of garment configurations. All right, we'll learn about different types of garment configurations. Showering. What are the opinions on showering on Shabbos? Taking home a wet towel. Okay. Applying oil to your body, to your skin. The Diomses River. And then the daf concludes with a discussion of barf potions. Yes, Piktavisin, our favorite topic. Let's move on. Kufmem Vav Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Misha Nashu v'chule. The Mishnah had said that the Mishnah was talking about somebody who was kind of walking somewhere and his clothes got wet in water. So the Mishnah had said he can keep on wearing them and the sun will dry them and it's no big deal. And when he gets to wherever he's going, just take off your clothes and let them dry in the sun, as long as nobody sees. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Kol makom she'asu chacham pnei maris ha'ayin, afilu b'chadrei chadarim aser. So it says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav that whenever the chachamim said that something is forbidden because we don't want people to see, because of the yentas, so then even in the chadrei chadarim, even if you are mamish in private, you cannot do it. So, meaning here we have an interesting thing where the Mishnah said you're allowed to take your clothes and put them out to dry as long as nobody could see. As long as nobody could see. If people could see, we don't want people to think that maybe you washed your clothing on Shabbos. So, rather just put them in a place where nobody could see and then you can do it. But one second, Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, he says that something that you're not allowed to do when people can see, you're also not allowed to do when nobody can see. So, Tanan, where am I? Mars Ayin Afil B'Chadrei Chadarim Aser. Tanan Shotchem B'Chama Aval Lo Keneged Ha'am. So then we ask a kasha on Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, because after all, our Mishnah says that as long as nobody sees that your clothes are drying, it's permitted. So the Gemara answers Tanai Hi. It's Lamais. It's Machlokas Tanaim. The Tani Shotchem B'Chama Aval Lo Keneged Ha'am. Rabbi Eliezer, Reb Shimon Osun. So actually, our Mishnah says what? That you're allowed to put out your clothing to dry as nobody sees, but it's actually machlokas, as long as nobody sees, but it's actually machlokas tanaim. Rabbi Eliezer and Reb Shimon would say that you would not be allowed to put out your clothing to dry, even if nobody can see. And Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav is based on Rabbi Eliezer and Reb Shimon, who say that it is not allowed. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, that whenever we have Maris Ha'ayin, you can't even do it, you wouldn't be able to do that thing, even if nobody can see. Amar Rav Huna, said Rav Huna, Menar taliso v'Shabbos chayav chatos. Somebody takes his clothing and he gives it a good shake on Shabbos, it's chayav korban chatos. As Rashi says in the second Rashi on the page, chayav chatos dezeu libuna, because this is how you would, whiten it. And therefore, if you have your clothing and it's like dirty, dusty, and you shake it out, that's whitening it, and that would be a problem. V'lo amaran, however, the Gemara qualifies this, however, and says this is, by the way, only talking about new clothing. If they're old clothing, then it would be acceptable. And this also is only talking about black clothing, where I guess the dust is much more noticeable. But if it's white clothing or if it's red clothing, you don't have to worry about this. You could shake all you want. And also you have to be makbid on it. You have to actually care that there's dust on your clothing. If you don't really care that much, then you could shake it out and it's no big deal. Now, a few weeks back, I had the privilege of being Janine's sugya sister for the day, and she pointed out that Rav Yehuda can be quite fiery sometimes, and we are going to experience that right now. Ula ikla l'Pumbedisa. Ula visited Pumbedisa. Now, at the time, Rav Yehuda was the Rosh Yeshiva in Pumbedisa. Chaza Rabbanan de Kamenapse Glimayu, and Ula noticed, he observed that the rabbis were shaking out their clothing. Amar kamachalin rabbanan shabsa, and he said, "Oy va'avoy, the rabbis are being machal Shabbos." Amalu Rav Yehuda nafutzele ba'ape, and Rav Yehuda said to the students at Pumbedisa, he said, "Go shake out your clothing in Ula's face." Anan lo kapdinon midi, we are not makbid on having dust on our clothes, and therefore we don't care, zeo. Abai hava koi kamid Rav Yosef. Abai was before Rav Yosef. Amalei, and he said to Rav Yosef said to Abai, Havli kumtoi. Abai, please bring me my hat. Of course, Abai was Rav Yosef's student. He also would take care of Rav Yosef towards the end of his life when he was sick. And Rav Yosef asked Abai to bring him his hat. Chazadika tala ale, and Abai said that, and Abai saw that there was dew on Rav Yosef's hat. Havaka mechasim lemeisvale, and Abai didn't know what to do because he didn't know how Rav Yosef held about shaking out garments on Shabbos. So on the one hand, Abai went to get the hat, and he saw that there was dew on it, and he didn't know what to do. Kilu, does he shake it out like Rav Yehuda said, or maybe Rav Yosef is makbid? He didn't know what to do. He was hesitating. So Amalei, Rav Yosef said to Abaye, Nifotz shdi, just shake it out and send it over to me. Anan lo kaptinan midei, we are not makbid on having a shtickle dirt, or in this case dew, on the keppel, on the hat. Amr Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amr Rav Yochanan, Hayotze bitalis mekupeles munachas lo al ksefo b'Shabbos chayev. Says Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, the name of Rav Yochanan, somebody goes out with a talis that is mekupeles munachas lo al ksefo on Shabbos, he's chayev. Got it? Good. Chayev chatas. What does that mean? It means, sometimes you might see some people when they're wearing a prayer shawl, they maybe take how do you usually wear a prayer shawl? Often they're like kind of long, and you drape it over your shoulders, and it hangs down the back, almost like close to the floor. Now, what if you take the garment and you fold it up, and now it's like only half length because you folded it in half, and you are now draping the half-folded talis over your shoulders, and you're wearing that in public because you don't want the talis to get dirty. Apparently, that's a problem, right? If you take your talis and you fold up the back of it so that it is half the length, and you drape this folded up talis over your shoulders, b'Shabbos chayev chatas, you can chayev a korban chatas. Tanya namilacha, we also learn in a brisa, sochrei ksus, clothing merchants, hayotzim betalisos mekupalos umunachos al ksefon b'Shabbos chayovin chatas. That if you have clothing merchants and they wear their shawls in this manner on Shabbos, they are going to be chayav a korban chatas. V'lo sochari ksus bilvad amru. It's not only clothing merchants that they said this about. Ela kol adam. Anybody who wears their shawl in this manner is chayav a korban chatas. Ela shedarken shal mochrin lotzeis kach. But this is the way of the merchants to wear it like this. But the fact of the matter is, it would be equally forbidden for anybody to do. Also, a shopkeeper who walks out on Shabbos with money that is tied to his garment is chayav a korban chatas v'lo chenvani bilvad amru. It's not only a storekeeper, ella kol adam. Rather, the same would be true for anybody who walks out with money tied to their clothing. It's just more normal, more regular for a shopkeeper to walk out like this, but it would be equally relevant to anybody. Varatanin, the people from this place called like Ratan or something, people from a certain place. Yotzim b'sudarin shal ksefan, they are permitted to walk out with some kind of kerchief on their shoulder. It's not just these Ratanin people. Anybody can go out with a kerchief on his shoulders. Just that it was normal for the Ratanin to wear these kerchiefs on their shoulders. Amr Yehuda says, Yehuda, Maiset Behurkanus, Benosha Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus. There's a story with Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus' son, Hurkanus, which is interesting because we had seen this on Daf. Where was this? Now I'm forgetting where this was. Oh man, I looked it up, but now I forget. But we had seen not too long ago that, one second, I gotta find it. What's this? No. Oh no, come on. Oh, very good. Kuf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. We had seen on Kuf Chav Zayin Amud Beis a story with Rabbi Akiva, who worked for Rabbi Eliezer, that Rabbi Eliezer didn't pay Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Eliezer said it's because he had made all of his, he had made a neder against all of his property, everything that he owned, because he didn't want Horkanus, his son, who wasn't studying Torah, he didn't want Horkanus to have anything to do with his property. Interesting. So now we have a story about this son Horkanus, who seems to have been doing just fine. So B'nosha Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus sheyatza b'suda shak seifa b'Shabbos. He went out with this kerchief that was on his shoulder on Shabbos. Ela shenima krucha lo be'etzbo. And what he did was he actually tied a thread to his finger so that it would be ki'ilu he's wearing it. When the matter came before the rabbis, they said, look, Lamaisa, Horkanus didn't even need to be machmir. He didn't even need to have a thread wrapped around his finger. He could have literally just taken the kerchief and put it on his shoulders, and that would have been fine. Darash of Nachman, Bar of Chizda, Mishmei of Chizda, Hilcha, Halacha, Afal Pisha, Ein Nima Kruch Lo Be'etz Ba'osav. That the halacha is, even if you don't have a thread wrapped around your finger, you would still be allowed to wear this kerchief on Shabbos. Fine. Ula, Ikla, Levei, Asi, Bar, Hini. Ula visited the besmedrash of Asi Bar Hini, but they asked Ula, Ma'ulai, sos marzev b'Shabbos. Are you allowed to make a marzev on Shabbos? We're going to explain what that means in a second. Armalu, he said to them, Hachi Amar Reb Ili, Asr la'asos marzev b'Shabbos. So Ula said that Reb Ili said that you're not allowed to make a marzev on Shabbos. My marzev, what's a marzev? Amar Reb Zera Kisei Bavlaisa. Reb Zera said it's a Kisei Bavlaisa. It's like basically, imagine you have a garment. Let's just take the talis again, like the cloak, and like you fold it up and there are like buttons there, and then you can like button it fold it up and button it, and you can keep on folding it up and buttoning it. Like there's ways to kind of like hold it into place. So I guess he was saying not to do that on Shabbos. Okay, don't like fold up and secure into place like your clothing on Shabbos. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Abba Yosef, coming to Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting before Rabbi Zera. Amalei Hachimai Amalei Aser v'Hachimai Amalei Aser. So Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting in front of Rabbi Zera, and he like was folding up his clothes and saying like, hey, if I fold it up like this, what is it? And Rabbi Zera said Aser. What if I fold it up like this? And Rabbi Zera said Aser. Okay. Amar Papa says, Rav Papa Nikod Hai Klala B'Yadach. Take this rule of thumb. Says Rav Papa, Kol Adaita Dilachnufe Aser Kol Dilisnaos Shari. He says, look, if your goal here is in order to gather together your clothing and like kind of keep it there permanently, and you're not really planning to, let's say, unbutton it or, undo this folding, well, then it's going to be a problem to do it on Shabbos. But if it's just temporary to make it look nice, and you're going to kind of undo it later on in the day when you get home or whatever, well, then it's permitted. Like if Shisha braid Rav Idi, he would, with his clothing, he would like, fold it up, make it look nice, but he would do it every single day, meaning he would let it out every night and then do it every day, so that would be permissible on Shabbos. Kasser of Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, Amar, he said, Pam achas yotze Rebbe lasade. One time Rebbe went out to the field. Vayu shnei tzidei taliso munachin al ksefo, and he had the two sides of his talis on his shoulders. If I understand correctly, it's basically like you may see many people doing in shul on Shabbos. They basically have this big, long and wide prayer shawl, and they take it and they take one arm and kind of drape it over one shoulder, and then the other side and kind of drape it over the other shoulder. So it's not really just kind of going down your arms. Rather, you kind of like, bunch it up and put it over either shoulder. So apparently Rebbe was doing it like that. And he went out to Rosh Hashanah. Amr the fun of Yoshua ben Zeruz ben Chamav Reb Meir. So Yoshua ben Zeruz, who was, it sounds like the brother-in-law of Reb Meir, the son of the father-in-law of Reb Meir, he said to Rebbe, Bazolo Chiev Reb Meir Chatas. Didn't Reb Meir say that you're chayiv for a chatas, that you're chayiv a chatas for wearing the talis in such a manner? Amr le diktek Reb Meir ad kan. Rebbe said, was Reb Meir really so medactic to this extent to say that, if you take this talis and put it over your shoulders like this, it is aser? Nonetheless, Shilsha Rebbe Taliso, Rebbe nonetheless just kind of let down the talis from his shoulders, so that, meaning to drape down his arms, so that he wouldn't potentially be in violation of what Rebbe Meir said. Kiyasa Ravin, when Ravin said, Amrlo Yoshua ben Zeruz hava, it wasn't Yoshua ben Zeruz, rather, Eli Yoshua ben Kfosai haya chasano Rabbi Akiva. Rather, the story was with Rebbe and Yoshua ben Kfosai, the son-in-law of Rabbi Akiva. Amr Bezolo Chiev Rabbi Akiva, and he said, to Rebbe, didn't Rabbi Akiva say that wearing the talis in such a manner would be chayiv achatas? So Amar lo dikta Rabbi Akiva ad kan. So Rabbi said, wow, was Rabbi Akiva really so makbid to say that wearing a talis in this manner would be chayav a korban chatas? Nonetheless, Shilshal Rabbi Taliso, Rabbi still let down the talis so that he wouldn't be in violation of what Rabbi Akiva said, according to that version of the story. Kiasar of Shmuel bar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Nishal Itmar. When Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came, he said, actually the story wasn't that Rabbi was like wearing a talis in this fashion. Actually, Rabbi was asked about would a person be able to wear a talis in this fashion, and then I guess there was this dialogue based on what Rabbi Akiva held, or Rabbi Meir held. Fine. Says a new Mishnah, Harochetz b'mei me'ara uv'mei tveria. If you have a person who bathed, past tense, meaning we're saying that he shouldn't do it milechatchila, but if he bathed in waters of a cave or in waters of Tveria, which were warm, v'nistapig, and then he used a towel to dry himself off, afilu be'eser alon tios, even if he used 10 towels, meaning that each towel is not really going to have that much moisture in it, because all of the moisture that he's using to dry himself is divided among 10 towels. Nonetheless, leivim biado, he still should not bring them home with him, because we're concerned that along the way, since he's by himself, he might wring out the towels, which I think was the Art Scroll said that that would be a form of kibus, a form of like laundering. We don't want him to do that. But if there are 10 people there, they can all share the same towel. Sounds lovely. And that towel will get extremely wet, particularly by the time the last person is drying himself off with it. Wow, they can even dry their faces, their hands, and their feet with it. Wow, I really would not want to be the last person. First person, I would want to be the first person. Alright, let's move on. And nonetheless, even though the towel is really drenched, you would still be allowed to, they could still bring it home with them, and we're not concerned that they're going to wring it out, because there are 10 of them. So if somebody's about to wring it out, his friend will remind him, hey, friend, don't do that. Sachin mashmishin, you can apply oil to your body and rub it into your body. Avalomis amlim velomis garin, but do not rub it in very strongly, and do not use some kind of a comb to rub it in. Now, how does that apply to lotions? I'm not sure how that applies to lotions. I don't know. I keep on thinking wrong things, but I also never look it up. In Yordan Kordima, we do not go down to the Kordima River. Vein osan apiktivizin, we don't make barf potions. Vein ma'atzvin esakain, we don't fix up the limbs of a little guy. Vein machzir nesashever, and we do not set a broken limb. Yeah. Misha nifika lo yado viraglo, somebody whose arm or his leg got dislocated. Yikes. Lo yichvein betzonin, do not I don't know, do some kind of movement in cold water to reset it. But you can bathe just kind of regular, and if while doing that the thing gets reset, well then mazel tov. Wow, there's some uncomfortable physical predicaments there at the end of that Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Katani me'mayra dumi d'mei Tiveria. So our Mishnah had said arochas b'me'mayra uv'mei Tiveria. So we're comparing the water of the cave to the water of Tiveria. Ma me Tiveria chaman, af me Meira chaman. So just like the waters of Tiveria, the chame Tiveria, just like the waters of Tiveria are warm, well, we're also assuming that the water of the cave is warm, that they would basically take water, heat it up, pour it into a cave, and the cave would keep it warm. Harochetz the eved in l'chatchila lo. Now, we're saying harochetz, somebody who bathes, meaning we're not saying that you should or can bathe in these warm waters on Shabbos, but if you did, then, whatever the halachas are about using a towel, 10 people, 1 person, whatever it is. Now, but it implies that you should not be bathing milichatchila. Michlal, that implies dilishtatev kol gufo, afilu lichatchila shapidami, right? However, that's only bathing, but the implication is that to shower, meaning instead of jumping into water, you would pour water over your head, well, that would be totally fine, right? Shapidami. So, who would be the Tana who says that? Reb Shimoni, the Tanya, as we learn in the Brayso, lo yishtatev adam bein b'chamin bein b'tzonin divrei Reb Meir. The Reb Meir says that you're not allowed to shower whether it's hot water, whether it's cold water. Reb Shimon Matir. Reb Shimon says you're allowed to shower in both hot and cold water. Reb Yehuda Omer b'chamin also b'tzonin mutar. Reb Yehuda says that you're not allowed to shower in hot water, but you are allowed to shower in cold water. The Mishnah had said, "V'nistapeg afilu be'eser alontios," and you're allowed to dry yourself off even with, yes, you're allowed to dry yourself off even with 10 towels, but the chiddush is, Well, let me let the Gemara speak for itself. Reisha Rabusa Kamashmalan v'Sefer Rabusa Kamashmalan. The Reisha is telling us a Chiddush, and the Seifa is telling us a Chiddush. What's the Reisha and what's the Seifa? The Reisha is that you have this person who he's by himself, and he dries himself off with 10 towels, and we say nonetheless he's not allowed to bring them back to his house with him. And the Seifa is that you have 10 people, they're all using the same towel, and they are allowed to take it back to their house with them. So Reisha Rabusa Kamashmalan, the Chiddush of the Reisha is that these towels are not going to have much water saturated in them because he used 10 towels to dry just himself off, so there's not going to be that much moisture in each towel. Nonetheless, since he's by himself, nonetheless we're concerned that he might wring out these towels since he's by himself and there's nobody to remind him not to do it. The Sefer Busa Kamashmalan, and the Chiddush of the Seifa is that even, this towel is now going to be sopping wet. You have 10 people drying themselves with it. Also probably really dirty. But since there are a lot of people, they're going to remind each other. Maybe that is also part of the Chiddush. Not just that they're wet, it's also really dirty. So they might be tempted to wring it out and clean it out somehow. So nonetheless, they're going to remind themselves not to do that. And even though it's sopping wet and super dirty, they're still allowed to take it back with them. And we're not concerned that they're going to squeeze it out, wring it out on the way. Tanarban, the rabbis taught, mistapig adam ba'alontis, a person is allowed to dry himself off with a towel, umanicha b'chalon, and he leaves it in the window. So he dries himself off with a towel, and he could put it in the window. I guess maybe if they're using like a bathhouse or something. I guess the assumption being that somehow this bathhouse was allowed. But do not give it to the bathhouse attendant because we're concerned that he might wring out the towel for you. Okay? Reb Shimon Omer mistapik ba'alontis achas umavia biyado l'soch beiso. Reb Shimon says that that an individual person is allowed to dry himself off with one towel, which will get wet, and nonetheless he can take it home with him. Of course, assuming that there's eruvs and that he can carry it, but he can take it home with him. And says Reb Shimon, we're not concerned that he's going to wring it out. Of course, not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that one person, even if he used 10 towels, he can't take them back because we're concerned he's going to wring them out. But here, Reb Shimon is saying that you're allowed to use one towel that's going to get wet, and nonetheless you can bring it back with you, and we're not concerned that you're going to wring it out. Amar le Rabbi le Rav Yosef. Abai says to Rav Yosef, Hilchasa mai. So Abai says to Rav Yosef, what's the halacha? No, if I dry myself with a towel on Shabbos, what can I do? Can I take it home with me or not? Amar le HaReb Shimon, HaRebbi, HaShmuel, HaReb Yochanan. Rav Yosef says, look, we have Reb Shimon, Rebbe, Shmuel, and Reb Yochanan, who all say that you would be allowed to take this towel with you, so you can kind of rely on them. Reb Shimon Adam Aron, so Reb Shimon, that which we just said, which is that a person can dry himself off with a towel and take it home with him. Rebbe Detanya, Rebbe has learned a brayso. Now listen up, friends, this is amazing. Amr Rebbe Kshayinu Lemedin Torah Eitzel Reb Shimon B'Tkoa. Isn't that amazing? We learned so many things from those words. Lemaisa, friends, on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, there was a Rashi. What did Rashi say? Who could tell me? What did Rashi say on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis? He said, right, so it says, the Shamim Rabbi Lazar, the Shamim Rabbi Shimon, Avua, the Hava Rabbi the Rebbe. We have a Rashi on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis that says that Reb Shimon was Rebbe's teacher. Now, I doubt that he was his only teacher, especially because Rebbe's father was Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, so I'm sure his father was his teacher also. But we see, Rashi said over there that one of Rebbe's Rebbeim was Reb Shimon. And we see over here in this brayso that says Rebbe, Kshayinu lemedin Torah eitzel Reb Shimon b'Tkoa, when we would learn Torah by Reb Shimon in Tkoa. What else do we learn? That Rebbe and Reb Shimon were hanging out in Tkoa. No, Reb Yisrael, don't you live in Tkoa? Ezi Carlson, you guys live in Tkoa. Do you guys go to the same mikveh that Reb Shimon and Rebbe went to the mikveh in? I don't know, maybe there's some kind of ma'ayan over there. Pretty special. Pretty chashuv. Anyway, so it says Darin, Ayinu mailin shemen va'alontis michatzer legag lekarpach ad shayinu magin etzel ma'ayan sheini rochtzim bo. So Rebbe says that when he would learn Torah with Reb Shimon in Tkoa, so we would bring oil and towels, michatzer legag lekarpach. Remember the other day, we learned that according to Reb Shimon, you're allowed to carry things on Shabbos from a roof to a, from a courtyard to a roof, from a roof to a karpaf, which is a non-residential Rishus HaYachid. So we see from like different kinds of Rishus HaYachids, you're allowed to carry things, and that's what they would do. They would kind of jump from one place, parkour. They would jump from one place to another, until they got to this Ma'ayan, a spring that they would bathe in, maybe go to the mikveh in. So we see that they would take oil and towels with them, and Rashi says, if they took them with them, they wouldn't just leave them there, they would take them back with them as well. Shmuel, where do we see what Shmuel says? Damar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, mistapig adam ba'alontis, that a person is allowed to dry himself off with a towel, umavia biyado l'soch beiso, and he can bring it back with him into his house. Rabbi Yochanan, Damar Rav Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha, that the halacha is mistapig adam ba'alontis, umavia biyado l'soch beiso, that you can dry yourself off with a towel and bring it home with you. Would Rabbi Yochanan really say this? Doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that the halacha is like a stam mishnah? Now it's very interesting because I was thinking the other day, or maybe just when I was learning this, who can remember? But, so Rabbi Yochanan says that the halacha is like a stam mishnah. Now, is that the generally accepted opinion that the halacha is like a stam mishnah, or is it just according to Rabbi Yochanan? It's interesting because we're really only asking it against Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that you're allowed to take a towel and bring it home with you. And we say, wait, how can Rabbi Yochanan say that? Doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that the halacha is like a stam mishnah? We don't ask that kasha against Shmuel. We don't say, hey Shmuel, what about the fact that the halacha is like a stam mishnah? Could be that this is davka, in my mind, I always just assume that the halacha is like a stam mishnah. When you have a stam mishnah, meaning what's a stam mishnah? It's a mishnah that isn't attributed to any particular rabbi. So the halacha is like that. But it could be that that's davka just Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. After all, we're only asking the kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, we're not asking it on Shmuel. It seems like this is davka Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Anyways, so we're saying, how could Rabbi Yochanan say that you could bring a towel with you to your house? What about the fact that we have a mishnah that's not right? Our mishnah isn't attributed to anybody particularly, and it says that you even if you use 10 towels, you wouldn't be able to bring them home with you. Right? We learn in our mishnah, that even if a person dried himself off with 10 towels and they're not particularly wet, he still should not bring them home with him. So the Gemara answers no. So actually, that mishnah is not our mishnah that says when you have 10 towels you can't bring them with you. It's not actually a stam mishnah. Apparently, it's attributed to somebody named Ben Chachinai, and Ben Chachinai said that even if you have 10 towels, you shouldn't bring them with you. But it's not a stam mishnah, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan doesn't have to hold like Ben Chachinai. Rather, he holds like Reb Shimon and Rebbe, who say that you would be allowed to take your towel back with you. So the bathhouse attendants could bring the towels of women with them to the bathhouse, as long as they cover their head and most of their body with the towel. Schanisa. Now, apparently there was some kind of thing that, I don't know if it was just women or maybe men and women, but after they would get out of the bathhouse, so they had some kind of towel of sorts that they would put on their head so that they wouldn't have to go outside with wet hair. So you would have to tie the two ends of this type of towel thing at the bottom so that it won't fall off, I think. Says Rabbi Chia bar Abba, name Rabbi Yochanan, it would have to be below your shoulders. Okay. Rava said to the people in Mechoza, that when you have to bring clothing for the Bnei Chela were the non-Jewish soldiers that would sometimes take up residence in Mechoza, and the people of Mechoza had to serve them. So part of what they would do is they'd have to bring their clothing with them to the bathhouse. So when you do that, so then have, I guess if it's Shabbos, then make sure that the ends of these things are under your shoulders. You're allowed to apply oil and rub it into your skin. You're allowed to apply oil and rub it into your tummy on Shabbos. As long as you don't do it in the way that you do it during the week. So how should you do it? What do you do? First, you should apply the oil to your tummy and then you rub it. Rabbi, sounds nice, I guess. Maybe. Rabbi Yochanan says that you can apply the oil and rub at the same time. That sounds more complicated. Avalom amlin. You can't like rub it very like rigorously. Amr b'chia bar Abba, Amr b'Yochanan asur lamad b'karka'isa shal diyomses mipnei sheme'ameles u'merapa. Says b'chia bar Abba in the name of Yochanan, you're not allowed to stand in the Diyomses river because it warms you up and also heals you. Okay, so I guess you wouldn't be able to do that on Shabbos. Amr Yehuda Amar Rav, kol yamel shal diyomses esim ve'echad yom. Says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav that the diyomses only has these healing qualities for 21 days a year. Vatzeres min minyan, and Shavuos is part of those 21 days. Ibarilu, they want to know, Atzeres lahagisa or lahagisa? Is Atzeres at the beginning? Is Shavuos at the beginning of this 21-day period? Or maybe it's at the very end of this 21-day period? Tashma, kamanir da amar Shmuel, kulhu shakiyane midivcha vad atzarta mailu. Well, Shmuel, who was the doctor, so he said all of these, drinks, these good drinks that are good for you, so they are particularly potent from Pesach until Shavuos. So therefore we want to assume that just like these drinks, their sort of season when they're very good for you ends with Atzeres. So we'll assume that the time that the Diyomses is particularly healing is the same and ends at Atzeres, at Shavuos. Dilma hasam hu decham dekarer alma maile avalacha mishum havalahu kam dechamim alma tvei maile. So the Gemara says maybe that's not necessarily a good proof, because maybe when it comes to the drinks are made from these herbs, and maybe the ideal time for these herbs is when, for between Pesach and Shavuos, when the world is very cool, and that's good for the growing of these herbs. Whereas the Diyomses River, it maybe is about like the steam and mists and stuff that comes from the river, and therefore we actually want the world to be warmer, and therefore maybe Shavuos is dafka at the very beginning of the season, so it's kind of hard to tell. Amar Bichelbo, says Bichelbo, Chamra de Progisa Umaya de Diyomses, that the wine of Progisa and the water of the Diyomses River, Kipchu Aseres Ashvatim Yisrael, they were the reason why we lost the 10 tribes, because they were enjoying a little bit too much this Progisa wine and also hanging out too much in the waters of the Diyomses, and because they were enjoying themselves a little too much and not enjoying the Torah quite as much, they got themselves into big trouble and we lost them forever. Now friends, I want you to listen to this. We have a story right now about Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Who was Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, friends? Who was Rabbi Elazar ben Arach? It's a real privilege to have Rabbi Elazar ben Arach in our Gemara. In general, the Tana Rabbi Elazar is Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, who is a student of Rabbi Akiva. The Amora Rabbi Elazar is Rabbi Elazar ben Pidas. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is like where it all begins. I mean, it begins earlier than that, of course, but the Zugos and Hillel and Shammai. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says he had 5 students. 2 of those students were Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. They were the teachers of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the teacher of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Right? These are like lots of the names that we see in the Mishnayos and in Brisos. They all kind of stem from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Now, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students. As we said, there was Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, there's Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, that's Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. There was also Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, that's not Rabbi Yossi who we see usually, that's Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. Right, this is Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Nesano, and the last one was Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. He's described as the Ma'ayana Miskaber, that he's the spring that just gets stronger and stronger. And the Mishnah says that if you would take all of the rabbis of Israel and put them on a scale, and you would put Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus on the other side of the scale, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus would outweigh all of them. The Mishnah then says, actually, if you take all of the rabbis in Israel and put them on one side of the scale, including Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, and put Rabbi Elazar ben Arach on the other side, he would outweigh all of them. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Arach that we're talking about. And listen to this story, friends. Listen to this story. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, Ikla lahasam, he visited the area of Diyomses. Imshich basrayu iakar talmudei. And he was enjoying the Diyomses river a little bit too much, and he forgot all of his learning. Maybe that's why we don't hear too much about Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Here he was, the star, Mamish the star, and what happened to him? We hear about Rabbi Eliezer, we hear about Rabbi Yoshua. What happened to Rabbi Elazar ben Arach? The Gemara says, Ki Adar Asa Kam L'Mikra B'Sifra, when he then came back from his expedition over there at the Diomses River, when he forgot all of his learning, he came back, Kam L'Mikra B'Sifra, he came to read from the Sefer Torah, Ba L'Mikra HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, he wanted to read the pasuk of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, Amar HaCheresh Haya Libam, and instead he made a mistake and he read that their hearts were mute, were deaf. That their hearts were deaf. And the Rabbanan saw this and they said, what has happened to Rabbi Elazar ben Arach? Bo Rabbanan Rachme Ale B'Hadar Tamudei, the rabbis prayed and he got back his learning. But I guess maybe things were never really quite the same after that. Now, there was a note in the art scroll that actually pointed to a Koheles Rabbah, a Brisa, a Medrash over there in Koheles, that actually gives a little bit, flushes out the story a little bit more, that actually what happened was, this was happening during the Churban Abayis, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and all of his students were kind of exiled, and they all went to, I believe, Yavne. Now, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach went to this other area, and his wife told him, look, you're the greatest, let them come to you. That was her advice to him, let them come to you. And they didn't end up coming to him, and this was kind of how this all led to him forgetting all of his Torah. So then the story is that when he went back to his friends finally, then he had slowly lost all of his Torah during that time. To which the Gemara now says, V'hainu d'Tnan, and now this is what it says in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avos, Rabbi Norai Omer, says Rabbi Norai, have a gola l'makom Torah, you should always make sure to go to a place of Torah. V'al tomar shehi tavo acharecha, do not say that it will come after you. No, rather make sure that you go to where the Torah is. Shechaverecha yikaimua biyadcha, because your friends will make sure that the Torah remains in your hands. Ve'el binascha al tishayin, don't just rely on your own intuition. Tana, we learn in the Brisa, lo Rabbi Norai shmo, his name was not Rabbi Norai, el Rabbi Nechemia shmo. His name was Rabbi Nechemia. V'amrila Rabbi Elazar ben Arach shmo. Some say that Rabbi Elazar, that actually the author of this Mishnah was actually Rabbi Elazar ben Arach himself, who was reflecting on this experience that he had, being by himself and forgetting all of his Torah. V'laman krashmo Rabbi Norai. What was his name? Why was his name called Rabbi Norai? Sheman hir eni chacham b'halacha, that he would make bright the eyes of the chachamim in halacha. Crazy story. Avalom is garin. We say that we do not comb into our flesh the oil. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, in gorin b'migareres b'Shabbos, we do not sort of comb our skin on Shabbos. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, im hayu raglav meluchlachos batitu v'tzoa gorer kedarko v'enachoshes. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, if his feet were all dirty with like mud and excrement, well, then he can just kind of comb his feet to clean them. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Avdale ime magrarta de chaspa. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda's mother made for him a comb of silver. Very nice. In Yordan, the Kordima, we said we do not go down to the Kordima River on Shabbos. My time, how come? Mishum pika, because you might slip. It was very muddy over there, and you might slip. And if you slip, then your clothes will get dirty, and you might wring them out. Okay? They get wet, get dirty, they might wring them out. Pein osin apik devizim b'Shabbos. You can't make barf potions. Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, lo shanu ela b'sam, about biyad mutter. So Rabbi Bar Bachana said, you can't make a barf potion, but you can always take your finger, stick it down your throat, and puke. That would be sort of the more acceptable way to induce vomiting on Shabbos. Tani Rabbi Nechemia Omer, af b'chol asur mipnei hefsed ochlin. Rabbi Nechemia says, look, you're not even allowed to make yourself barf during the week, because what's going to happen is, if you barf up all your food, well then you'll be hungry again. And if you're hungry, well then you'll eat more. And it's hefsed kilu, it's baltashchis to just eat a whole bunch of food, barf it up so that you can eat more food. Just eat the food that you need. Weiter. Where are we? You can't wrap up a little guy to set his bones. Says Rabbi Bar Bachana, name Rabbi Yochanan, 1 second, you're allowed to swaddle a little guy on Shabbos to make sure that his bones are all set. But 1 second, our Mishnah says that you're not allowed to put these bones in place. No, when the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to put the bones in place, it means if you have the vertebrae and you gotta put them in place, well, that's kind of like bone building, like you're building the little guy. But if you're just wrapping the little guy, that's okay. Okay. Friends, that was Daf Kuf Mem Zayin. Kind of smooth sailing, right? Right. Says my notebook. Let's go over things. So we talked at the beginning about drying clothes in private. There was a question about what about Maris Ayin, right? So apparently it's a machlokas. Tanakama says that you're allowed to dry your clothing in the courtyard as long as nobody sees, whereas Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon say that you're not allowed to, because anything that you're not allowed to do in public, you also can't do in private. Shaking out clothing, we say, well, you shouldn't do that if it's new clothing, if it's black clothing, and if you care about it, but otherwise you can. Going out with different types of garment configurations, if you take your talis and fold it up in all sorts of different ways, take a look at Kuf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph to see if you're allowed to do that. Although, probably you should really just be looking at the Shulchan Aruch, or, I don't know, figure it out on your own. Okay, showering. What's the deal with showering? So Reb Meir says you're not allowed to shower in hot or cold water. Reb Shimon says you're allowed to shower in hot or cold water. You are allowed to. Reb Yehuda says it depends. If it's hot, then you're not allowed to shower. If it's cold, you are allowed to shower. Very interesting. Taking home a wet towel, Tanakama, who Rabbi Yochanan argues is Ben Chachinai, says that you would not, if you kind of dried yourself off with a towel, you wouldn't be able to bring it home with you because we're concerned you might wring it out, which would be a kind of like washing it, kibus, like laundering it. Whereas Reb Shimon, Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Yochanan say that it would be permitted. We talked about applying oil. Reb Chaim Bar Chanina says you can apply and then rub it. Rabbi Yochanan says you can apply and rub it at the same time if you could manage to do that all at the same time. We talked about the Diomses River, about its healing qualities and how it heals for 21 days of the year. We also had that very interesting story about Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, who was hanging out by the Diomses River and he forgot all of his learning. And then the rabbis prayed and it came back to him. Barf potions. Rabbi Bar Bachana says, asr. But you can make yourself puke with your finger. That's okay. Rabbi Nechemia says, no, you can't even make yourself puke with your finger, during the week or with a potion, whatever. You shouldn't be puking during the week intentionally because it's wasting food. Because, eat the food and let it help your body. Don't just puke it out so you can eat more. Friends, that's Daf Kuf Mem Zayin. Hope you liked it. Have fun.